everybody, and welcome to another CER event. This is the fifth in our CER Action Series. I'm Jeannie Allen, the CEO of the Center for Education Reform, and I'm delighted to have you with us today. Apologize for the late start. We know some people were having a problem connecting, and so we're delighted that we have a critical mass of our attendees with us. I'm going to ask Michael Musanti, my colleague in crime, to join me. We're going to give you a couple of thoughts before we kick off this session with the amazing Brian Britton and Amy Valentine. So if we can see Michael, that would be awesome. Let me just start by saying, as we're waiting for Michael, I don't know how long you guys have thinking we're in quarantine. I'm thinking it's around, I don't know, is it week 7, week 8, something like that? By a show of hands, how many people are really sick of it and ready to move on with life? So I'm sure lots of you have your hands up. Yep, there we go. Oh my gosh, there's like 18, 19, 90. Yeah, exactly. And so we are here. Hello, Michael Musanti.
Hello, Jeannie Allen.
We are here to help you get through the quarantine, help you plan for the future of school, and help make sure that all of our kids get well served. So thank you for joining us. For those of you, if it's your first time, welcome. Lots of tapes from the past, and we just want to do our part in helping counter the curve of COVID on education. So Michael, it's Giving Tuesday. Let's start with that.
It's Tuesday. I had no idea what day, week, year it was. We're stuck in a time loop here. I have no idea what's going on in the outside world. I'm sorry I can't help you.
This is the real Michael Musanti. He and I have worked together on and off for about 20 years, and he's been a joy and a pain at the same time. No, kidding. You've been awesome. So so Giving Tuesday is, it's a new Giving Tuesday. Some of you may have gotten our emails. Hey, listen, give to charities and things that you want to give to today. $2, $5, $10, $10,000 for those of you who can. It's important we all help. I'm giving to my favorite charities as well as to CER. You can jump on our donate page and do that if you want. This stuff does cost money and it doesn't come for free. And we are happy, by the way, with a very, right, Michael, we've got a huge Twitter following, Facebook. We want to promote your efforts too. So if there's things we should be promoting that you're doing out there, let us know. Tweet at us. We will retweet it. That's the way this goes, right?
Yes, we've been very excited about the response to these webinars, Jeannie. We've been averaging, 300 to 400. I think it started with your idea of just getting practical solutions out to people. I'm personally going to start mailing calendars to everyone just to show where we are at the date and things like that. Put a sundial on your roof. I'm not sure.
So it's absolutely right. And today we have probably, I'd say 80% of you are in or leading a school or an educational organization or an ed tech company doing education. Many of you are in the media. We have foundation people. We have interested parents that we've been communicating with. So we're really excited to have you.
Elected officials.
Elected officials, exactly.
Yes,
Congress,
yes,
state
policymakers. Yes.
Who really want your solutions, by the way, and that's one of the reasons we're doing it. And again, this is a call for action. Tell us what those solutions are. We have some ideas for you. Brian and Amy will share some ideas from you, but we really want to make sure we're sharing them. One other shameless plug, but an offer as well at the same time. We are going to be highlighting every week a book of our choosing that you nominate for us. If you are an author, if you have a book, if you want someone reading something you're doing, we're happy to use our megaphone. It's what CER has done for 26 years, right? So Michael, I have a book. Should I share mine as a example?
I find it to be an amazing coincidence that the time we start having a book recommendation time is when you have a book.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing.
And I'm just going to show you all the book, and it's going to go in front of my face. Although, wait, I have my virtual screen. And Michael, the name is?
The name is An Unfinished Journey, Education and the American Dream. by Michael Musante, by Jeannie Allen.
So thanks to the help of the people at CER, I published this book in January, and it is available on Amazon as well as a really cheap Kindle download. All the royalties are actually going to an Italian hospital that has been working really hard to solve COVID for many, many people. So please consider buying it. It's actually a great history of not just what's been happening in the field for a long time, but it's a personal reflection on why that's important. And that unfinished journey in that picture is Bella Italia. There's my virtual thing. All right. All right, finally, we want to get you guys involved here. We have a poll before we turn to our fabulous guests. Mr.
We have one more point, Jeannie, that you wanted to make, though. We also want suggestions. We have some guests lined up for the next couple of months, but if you have suggestions, if you know of people out there who are doing an amazing job of delivering educational programs, solutions, let us know. And we will try to line them up and get them on as well. So we will take recommendations. Sorry, all yours.
And send those to events@edreform.com, or again, tweet them and we'll retweet them. And so we can all tell thousands and thousands of people what we want them to hear. Okay, so a poll. I don't know if we can show that or not. There we go. We want you to take this poll. You can use your little polling area down at the bottom of your screen. How do you believe schooling should look going forward? We should send kids back to brick and mortar schools, and we should have digital learning as an alternative. We should send kids back to school and continue to educate, much like we have up until now, the status quo. We should scrap the whole thing and start over. So we want your opinions, and I guess we will see what we get from this poll, and we will share it. By the way, we're getting lots of calls from the media on a regular basis about this. And look, we know, right, Michael, you've got kids at home. I started before many of you. I was smart, so I'm still young. But I can't imagine what it's like. I'm sure everybody wants to push their kids out the door, but at the same time, many people are questioning whether that's the right thing to do right away. I don't know.
There are some, not just for health and safety issues, but there are some parents of school-age children who go to school with my children, my son specifically, who is in the 6th grade, finishing up the 6th grade, who have said their children actually are learning more and more efficiently via a computer, via virtual learning. And so it's been a little bit of a surprise for some of them as well to see that going on, something they never would have expected.
And then I got an email last night from a fantastic charter school leader in Texas who said it's a disaster for us. And so maybe I haven't figured out and explored it yet with him. Maybe they haven't figured out how to do it. We're going to talk to our guest in a couple of minutes and find out how they're doing it. So keep voting, folks, and I think we can keep going as you guys vote and continue to vote. And
we can. And Jeannie, I know you wanted to mention something about teachers as well, being Teacher Appreciation Day.
Yes, thank you. It is Teacher Appreciation Day. I was thinking about that yesterday. In fact, I tweeted about, ironically, 2 of my favorite teachers of all time, one from high school, one from college. We're both named Feldman. Lynn Feldman was my American government teacher in high school and totally inspired me to do what I'm doing today. And Susan Feldman was a philosophy professor. And they were both tough as nails, but they made a huge impact on me, as so many of them did. And I think teachers today are our heroes. We should be clapping for them almost as much as healthcare workers. What do you think?
Yeah, I can count on probably 2 fingers the bad teachers I had, and just a phenomenal long list, too long to mention. And you know, wherever our poll goes, I think the core thing is we're always going to need great teachers behind it, whether it's virtual, whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's distance, it doesn't matter. I think there are phenomenal teachers who have adapted and who have done very well. And I think sometimes, as you're well aware, Jeannie, systems fail, right, and administrators fail, and bureaucracies fail.
Right.
Fairfax County is a perfect example. The teachers didn't fail to be able to set up
Right.
distance learning. They were ready. It was the bureaucracy that failed. So we don't have, thank God, a bureaucracy appreciation day. If that ever comes, I'm out. I'm gone. I'm in whatever country doesn't celebrate that day.
So awesome. Well, thank you, Michael, for joining me. We'll see you back at the Q&A. And let's bring in our first guest, Brian Britton, the CEO of National Heritage Academies. Some of you might know a little bit about National Heritage Academies or maybe looked it up. Brian has a passion for service, and he uses it to serve more than 59,000 students around the country at NHA. Welcome, Brian, this morning to the virtual event we're having.
Thank you, Jeannie. It's good to see you.
I'm so happy to see you, and lots of other people can access your bio elsewhere. But listen, let's just start and sort of level set for everybody. Tell us what National Heritage Academies is. You've got 89 schools?
Yeah, 89, soon to be 90, 91. We have been in this for 25 years now. Founded 25 years ago with our first school in Western Michigan by our founder and still chairman, J.C. Huizinga, who believed that there was a better way. Strong supporter of Milton Friedman's concept that anything that the public sector does, the private sector can do twice as well, generally much more efficiently. We are at, as you said, close to 60,000 students in 9 states now.
Wow.
And I think we're up to about 5,500 employees across the country.
And when schools function typically for NHA, what do the regular challenges look like?
Oh, well, so you know what? Operating a system that's as geographically diverse as ours, first of all, is its own challenge. We saw that especially during the COVID, trying to keep track of what states were doing what districts were doing what, are schools open, are they closed, when do they open? So that's always a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, you know, just trying to reach kids that come to us oftentimes so far below grade level is a challenge. And then I think for all of us, teacher shortage. How do you find the quantity and of course the quality of teachers to serve the needs of our kids and families?
So if that wasn't enough, then COVID hits, right?
Yep.
So then talk to us about that, those challenges in that transition. How did you, what was your remote learning strategy as you looked at, and how you've got challenges with kids anyways, everyone does, helping them get up to speed. What'd you do?
Well, I tell you, it's been sort of neat to reflect here over the last several weeks. Looking back 8 or so weeks ago, it seems like a lifetime almost in some ways. You know, I think we started like everybody else in that we were trying to organize, put logistics in place, get our school buildings secured, and get meals distributed and handing out devices to kids who needed them. So we spent the first, what we called phase 1, which was the first week or so, sort of getting our legs under us. And then we quickly moved into a systematic remote learning phase where we sort of looked at this maybe a little bit differently. We set some clear principles right from the beginning. The first is we wanted to provide some type of best-in-class service to our families. And what that meant was we wanted to put the parents at the center. I know that sounds unusual. You might say, no, we're going to put the kids at the center. No, we felt like the parents were going to bear the brunt of this, right? And so we need to do whatever we can to ease that burden for them and look at them as our primary customer. So we put together also a system that was designed to have access for all. We have so many schools in challenged areas where people don't have access to either devices and or internet connectivity.
Right.
So you know what, we wanted to make sure that we had at least a ground zero playing field. And then we wanted to make sure that whatever we did, it was going to be simple and it would equip our teachers. And we wanted our teachers to move from sort of planning and creating to engaging. So we wanted to take the planning and creating off of their plates. And so how we did that is we quickly designed and worked with some of our vendors and partners to put together 350,000 or so learning packets that we mailed out to all of our students and families. And so we sent basically 8 or so workbooks per grade, per child out. And that was going to be the basis of our learning. And when I say basis, like that was sort of the ground zero that everybody could access that. And, you know, I'm not sure my people appreciate this much, but 3 of my children, my 3 kids, attend one of our schools. So I was sort of able to see this firsthand. And my wife has become principal, teacher, cafeteria worker, and disciplinarian. Because, you know, of course, I'm way too busy to be doing that at our house. And sort of being able to watch what was happening and then make real-time adjustments was pretty neat. And
Brian, what's really interesting, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we've had this conversation on a lot of the events about, and I'm not, this is a bad way to put it, but low tech versus high tech.
Yep.
Right? Now you've got K-8 schools. So a lot of folks out there are, you know, focused on high school, lots of digital, but even NHA's DNA has not been typically a technology first strategy. And so I don't know of anybody else. I thought it was really interesting when you told me that on our pre-discussion.
Yeah.
That you guys literally printed, you know, 350,000 or so packets and got them to everybody so they'd have something, because we have been hearing from people in a lot of underperforming and disadvantaged communities that they need something in hand, even if they have a device.
Yeah, so you're dead on, but I will say that we wanted to meet people where they were. So we gave or are giving our students and families the option to engage via the workbooks only, or to engage via workbooks and all the virtual platforms that we set up with Google Meets and Google Hangouts, Google Classroom, some iReady, Dreambox stuff that we're utilizing. And so like my house, my kids do both, right? So they'll access some things via their Chromebook on their device. They'll access some things in the workbook. A few times a week, they'll be on live in a live virtual classroom with their teacher, which is really fun for them. So we're meeting folks sort of where they are.
Do we have a slide? I think we have a couple of slides of what that looks like. So if we could show those, that would be really cool. And while we're looking for those, before those pop up, so how did you initially, so you mail these, but how did you initially reach out to your families to kind of set those expectations and the teachers? I mean, was it, you know, everyone obviously struggling with this, even those that are doing great. Was it, oh my gosh, get everybody on an email chain, calls? I mean, how did you mobilize so quickly?
So we did utilize a war room out of the gate. So I think we had a war room set up for the first 3 weeks. And that was sort of our communication hub, where we not only communicated with our school staff, but also with our parents directly via email mostly. We do have a school messaging system like most do, so we could send out texts as well as voicemails, and then even have sent a few videos out to parents. We tried to the extent we could, have that come from our principals, but sometimes it just made more sense to come from our central office here. But I tell you, I was proud of our team, because some of the things that we've always wanted to do, but we said might be too difficult, well, we figured it out.
Right.
Communication was one of those, and then how to do virtual meetings and virtual professional development was another one of those things.
So here's an example, I guess. Brian, talk to us about what we're seeing here, and then let's go quickly through the slides on that.
Yeah, so here's an example. So what we did is we asked our teachers to, and we engage directly with our families. That meant at least one time a week, a teacher had to place a phone call or send a personal email to a family that was tailored to that child or those children in that household.
Okay.
And above and beyond that, every Sunday, teachers send out a weekly schedule to their parents. Say, these are the things to cover. Here's the recommended times that you might want to think about, or how much allocation of time you might give to a subject. And then here are some sort of links to websites and tools that your students can access.
And during times, like they can also, this doesn't mean they're only working from 9 to 11 or 2 to 4. In between, they're teaching and whatever.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Unless we set a specific time where there'll be a virtual class. Like my kids have a 10 o'clock class every day.
Okay. Got it.
But what you're seeing in front here is the tools for the teacher as well. The teachers can go in and access exactly what the students have in front of them. And so they can work alongside the students and coach the students and families through the material. And so this is a schedule, a sample schedule for a sample grade.
Okay, what do we have next?
This is an example of a workbook here that went out. I'm not sure what grade this is, but this would show on day 2 or 3 of week 3 or 4, do this math lesson.
Great. And then just
yeah, more of the lesson here.
Okay. Trading cards, got it. Solve the problem. And then these are things kids are doing on their own. The students are doing on their own. Sorry, folks, kids. And then the workbooks get submitted how? Like, how do the answers get submitted? Are those online? Is that?
Yeah, so there's two options. One, for workbooks, teachers can take photos and then submit them to the teacher. If they're working online via Google, then we'll use Google platform and they can submit their work via Google platform.
Got it. What about disabled children, those who have a disability and parents not equipped to help that child with something like this? Are you relying on the parent being home next to the child, or do they have agency? Again, we've had this debate. I know Amy will join us in a bit, has philosophy about this, but how much do you care about that? I hate to sound like you don't care, but how much is that an issue?
Well, I care a lot. One, in general, because I care, but two, I have one of those kids in my house. I tell you what, it's been a challenge because, as everybody knows, they're called IEPs for a reason. They're individual. And so each child has their own individual needs. So in some cases, it's pretty simple to get online with that child and cover sort of the same things that you would be covering in a school brick and mortar environment with that child. But depending on the child's sort of learning disability or opportunity, that can be more difficult. So if there are things that are physical, I'll be honest, we haven't cracked the code on how to attend to physical needs remotely. I'm not sure who has. I'd love to know if somebody has done that. But we early on set a list of expectations for how our special education teachers and assistant teachers and paraprofessionals would engage. So for example, in my house, they schedule twice a week some face-to-face time with my daughter and walk her through things like speech therapy, some remedial reading work, etc.
This is a question that comes up every time. And I think, Brian, your point about it's called IEP for a reason. It's also individual. There should be like a term about the special needs teachers are also individual, right? We have a lot of teachers in my family, my extended family, lots of friends. And I have one in particular who's a special needs teacher. in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I've watched her since the beginning. She posts the videos from her school on Facebook. She sort of shares what they're doing. And she said, you know, I'm calling regularly to my students. I am giving them as much focus, as much attention. I'm assessing where they are. And that's helping the parents help them. And so, you know, that's one thing. So it's Teacher Appreciation Day. And of course, we appreciate all that great work, but not every teacher has the same approach, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's probably also, there's not one answer. What about parents? I mean, is parental engagement critical for the student's success, and to what level are you seeing that in this? Like, what are the best practice parental engagement things you're doing?
Well, listen, the answer is yes. And right now, of course, it's even more critical for parents and caregivers to engage with their children. For us, what has been successful for us is to sort of sit down with each parent. When I say sit down, have a video call or a call with each parent to really get inside their heads to find out what their specific needs are. For example, my wife is still working full-time. She commutes every day, however, from her office to the kitchen table, aka our classroom, back and forth. And so our teachers have designed calendars around her work schedule, right? To sort of accommodate her needs. And to the extent that we can do that for everybody, we should be doing that for everybody. But let's be honest here. There's a large group of parents and families that aren't engaging at all, despite our best efforts.
Right.
The number of times we connect with families, and we probably have 10 to 15% across our system of students and families that sort of have disappeared. And we've tried everything and haven't figured out how to sort of engage and reach those families.
So you have a guesstimate, what percent or et cetera? Like, what do you think? And are you thinking it's is it 20%? Is it 10%? And does it vary based on location?
It varies based on location. So we see in our sort of more affluent suburban locations where we're probably 100%. And some of our, like in Detroit, that's really struggling. It's a hot spot right now. We guesstimate we don't get to 10, to some cases, maybe 20% of the kids for whatever reason. And again, it's not for lack of effort or trying.
You know what, I'll take 10 to 20% over 50, right? I mean, you know, that's a challenge, and you're clearly concerned about it. And we can't let those kids slide and be left behind. But I don't think that's insurmountable. I don't know about you.
No, and it's not. And so I'm actually looking at it the opposite way. I'm looking at, wow, look at our amazing parents that are figuring out how to do this and do their jobs if they have jobs, and figure out how to at least provide something for their kids. And I'm actually excited about that. And frankly, we're hopeful that the word of mouth will get out and inspire other parents.
And were there parents that you couldn't get to connect, or did you give people everything they needed?
So to the extent that we could, we, sort of like handed the devices to kids on their way out the door, right? So that they would have them. And then because we sent out the learning packets, we know that the majority of our kids and families received them. We think we had less than 1% were returned to us for incorrect addresses, which was shocking to me. So we feel like most of our parents and families have the tools. And then we have reached out directly to all of our parents.
And I bet
some folks just have higher needs and priorities right now, and I guess I understand that.
So you made a comment to me about that this was pushing us to places we always wanted to go, but faster. What does that mean? And again, you're a charter school network, of schools serving 59,000 students. What were you hoping to do differently in the future that all of a sudden you're doing?
Well, listen, I'm excited to listen to Amy here because we want to progress into more of a blended learning education platform. But we want to do that in the right way that adds value, that we actually see improved results as a result of utilizing technology effectively. And so we've been hesitant in trying things such as using the Google Meets platform,
Right.
and the Google Classroom platforms. Now, we do a lot with technology inside the building, right?
Right.
So this is forcing us to figure out how to do it outside of the building.
Right.
And so we've implemented tools like iReady, Dreambox. We've toyed with them.
What is iReady? Everybody keeps mentioning iReady. I know about almost every other tool that someone's mentioned, but not iReady.
iReady is a reading support, sort of ELA support platform that a lot of our schools have used in many cases for reading intervention, but it wasn't a NHA system-wide requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we've made it available system-wide, and we were able to do that relatively quickly, thanks to our partners and our vendors, by the way, for helping us do that.
That's great.
But that's just an example of us moving faster to blended learning than we thought maybe we would move to.
We're going to bring on Amy if we can, and as I'm bringing her on to introduce her, and by the way, for folks out there, we're looking at this as hello, beautiful Amy, how are you? We're looking at this as kind of, or I'm dating myself, Johnny Carson or Jay Leno. I hear that Jimmy Fallon really doesn't do this, but it used to be you bring on another guest and one guest would shift to the couch. So Brian, you're on the couch.
All right.
And I'm welcoming Amy, the executive director of the Futureof.School, which is a national charity supporting the growth of innovative school models, including blended and online learning. It was previously the foundation for blended and online learning. So we'll hear a little bit about that. She's an educator. She's worked with educators across the country and with a number of schools. She's an administrator, and she's just a rock star. And she's working a lot with these same issues. So, and Amy, just before I kind of get you going, one of the comments that I thought was really interesting from the Q&A section is a comment that this is new to all parents, and they don't understand the need for involvement completely, but they'll catch on. And my emotions go like this whenever I do these interviews. I'm like, oh, this is great. Oh, that's right, we're not reaching these people. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. Oh, that's right, we forgot this. But really, like, parental involvement is an anomaly where we haven't actually expected parents to be involved one-on-one. And so the more parents feel they need to be engaged, I think that the more, this Lucy, who said this in Q&A, and thank you, Lucy, was absolutely right, they will be engaged. And so what does that say from your standpoint for what you're doing? How are you helping introduce this future of school to people?
Well, thank you for having me, Jeannie. It's really great to be here. And Brian, thanks for all the hard work you're doing for the thousands and thousands of kids and families across our country. I really learned a lot from your presentation. And I did submit a few slides. I think some visuals might be helpful too. Everything that everyone is saying is resonating with me. Like you said, Jeannie, my training is as an educator. I taught in the classroom in a rural school, in an urban district, and in a suburban district. And then I switched over in 2005 to teaching online, to building community networks of parents and families and students in full-time online school, which was the complete opposite of what I had experienced before. And it was funny because I caught up with, my former boss a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how big this shift and change is in our country right now for parents, for teachers, for students, for everybody. And I said, geez, remember back in 2005, we had training and it was still hard. And she said, Amy, do you remember how many of the teachers who were hired specifically to teach online, how many of them wanted to quit? Because it was such a departure from what we had known. So even the first thing I would say is, even with the training for parents and teachers and administrators, it still is a shift, but there are so many beautiful outcomes of tech-enabled teaching and learning. And to your point, it's new. It's new to our country. So I think, historically, it's been easy for parents to send their kids to school, local brick and mortar school, assume that everything's good. We look at, okay, they're getting A's and B's, they're doing well. But when we really delve deep into what teaching and learning is and what the education process is, it's so much more than that. And I think all of us who've been supportive of different models of teaching and learning have wanted this kind of collective awakening in our country of, there's so much to it. It's more than, putting a kid on a bus. And so now we're seeing that. And so I included a picture of my son because I saw something come through the chat about special needs, and my son has a form of dyslexia, and he really struggled in the second grade. And so I worked with his school. I partnered with his school. I was an advocate for him. I made sure that his 504 had everything he needed in it. And the one thing that his school did not have was technology to support him. They didn't have dictation software. They didn't have the simple tools. So I provided it for him so that he could have what he needed in the classroom. And I had many friends say to me, oh my gosh, that's so great that you knew what to do. And I said, I didn't know what to do. I figured it out. And so I think that's for me, the heart as a parent of how I feel for parents in our country. I've been involved in education for my whole career, and I still have been challenged as a parent of a student who learns differently, figuring out what they need and how to equip the school with that instead of pulling them out of school, because it's not always what it's about. So it's ironic that I run an organization called Futureof.School because our work has been in play for a long time. We've existed, like Jeannie said, we were the foundation for blended and online learning for 4 years. And it was just this past fall that we switched over to this new name and this new brand. Our work is still the same. Our work is and has always been broadcasting the impact that new ways of teaching and learning have on teachers, on students, and on families. So as a nonprofit, we've given scholarships to kids who have taken online and blended classes. We give grants to teachers who are innovating in the classroom. And we do research grants and publish papers to educate society as a whole. So before I stop for some of your awesome questions, I will say I had a conversation with a colleague yesterday, and we were talking about how we changed our name last fall. And he said, why did you change your name? And I said, because we want to speak to America. We want to speak to everybody. Education is something that shouldn't be a third rail issue in our country, whether you have children or you don't. People are business owners. They need a ready workforce. People are taxpayers. People are citizens. People are part of the community. And unfortunately, education's gotten, kind of marginalized and put in this, it's only about school. And now we're seeing it's about so much more. And so my colleague said yesterday, oh my gosh, it's almost if like you manifested this situation. And I said, well, if I could manifest something, it would have been not through a pandemic. It would have been just through the storytelling we do about the impact that it has. But we are where we are. And that being said, Jeannie, and you know me, I'm not a glasses half full. I'm a glasses overflowing. So I tend to look at the silver linings. It is really difficult and it's a challenging time, but there's a lot of amazing growth and transformation that is coming out of this, that will continue to come out of this in terms of school choice, school transformation, and what new school looks like.
I was muted, I apologize. As we're kind of going through this, and I don't know if we have additional slides, I think probably a lot of people out there are saying to themselves, not just here, but well, that's great. There's people out there doing online blended learning educators. There's not really that many. There's not that many are interested. How do you respond to that? Like, this is just kind of fringy. Most people aren't part of that.
Yeah, and if we can advance to the next slide that has the map, that's a perfect segue to one more, please. Yeah, that's a perfect segue, because just because we don't see it in the media and just because we don't hear about it in our circles and networks, it is happening, and it has happened. Everything from hundreds of thousands of students enrolling not only in, full-time online programs, but programs that school districts have come up with. They've come up with blended programs to meet the needs of kids. Rural schools are leveraging community college classes online and other ways of doing online and blended learning for course offerings for students. So it has been pervasive. Does that mean it's been the tipping point or the majority? No, it hasn't. But part of that is a knowledge piece. And part of that, not to make this political, but part of it's a policy piece, right? There's policies that limit and are constraints in certain states. So that's really challenging. And at Future-of-School, we firmly believe that your zip code should not determine access to a quality education that you can enroll in. So we put this slide up because, like I said, and this is my shameless plug right now, is we're a nonprofit. Every year we give scholarships to kids and grants to teachers and publish really strong literature-based and also program-based research to help inform the practice. Go to our website. Our student stories are free. But if you look at this map, this is last year's data. In 3 years, we gave 133 scholarships to students in 43 states, including Puerto Rico. And we use a scholarship management company. And if this isn't telling, I don't know what is. When we started working with them in 2016, they're a nonprofit. They're based out of Minnesota. And in meeting with my program manager about structuring our scholarship program, she said, I'm going to need a definition, Amy, of online classes and online blended classes, because my team, as they're evaluating, they're having a really hard time understanding what constitutes that. So it has been around. I mean, the reality is the first online classes emerged in 1994, 1995 in Oregon from teachers that wanted their kids to have access to electives that they didn't have qualified teachers for. So for me, there's so much of this has come from educators, right? From the educator perspective, I want to meet and exceed the needs of my students. How can I do that? And to your point, Jeannie, the role, and Brian, I think you said it too, the role of the teacher has never been more visible and of more critical importance. And historically, things like, oh, computers are going to replace teachers. We don't want robots teaching our kids. That's not what it's about at all. Technology is a tool that makes differentiated instruction easier for teachers. Now, I'm not saying that's the case right now, because what we're missing is the training, right? It's like we went from 0 to 100 in our country in a week.
Because that is actually something that's come up in the last couple of webinar virtual events we've had with John Hage from Charter Schools USA, with Julie Young from Digital ASU Digital Prep, by others, that the training piece for teachers is kind of everything, if you will. Yes, you can absolutely get this done slowly, but without that, it's really, really hard to provide. So how do you even begin on that? And why, kind of separate question, why does somebody want to teach in this way? What benefit to me to go into teaching and not show up in that classroom, right? Am I going to get, I was talking earlier about my two Feldman teachers. Am I, if I'm a Susan Feldman or Lynn Feldman, did I go into teaching so I could be here or so I could be in a classroom? Like, I think these are the things that I'm throwing out, not to cast doubt on it, but these are the things in people's minds. Why would I go into something different? How could you possibly find them?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the first part of your question was around the training, right? Because about 4 other ideas popped in my head between then. So yeah, I mean, here's the reality. This is not an ideal situation. In an ideal situation, teachers would have been equipped with even a modicum of training. We would have made sure that families had the resources and the technology they needed, right? So to me, and again, this is the eternal optimist, everyone is being charged with doing the best that they can in the moment. And to parents, I will say, it's easy to feel like what you're doing isn't good enough. But if you're showing up and supporting your kids and helping them through, even if it's new to you, you're doing a great job. Right. And teachers, So it's this induction by fire for teachers. It's such a short period of time. So again, to teachers, it's what is your what are the guidelines that your school or your district are giving you for how you should be using technology in this COVID crisis right now? Because what's happening right now isn't likely going to be what next year is going to hold, right? But what we're teachers, the benefits for them right now is they're able to see, oh my gosh, there's so much more to Google Classrooms, for example. There's so much more I can do in the computer lab in my brick and mortar school. Or, oh, wow, I have really been, I've had my face pressed against the glass metaphorically to figure out how do I connect with students that don't answer the phone, that I can't reach out to. What do I do? Oh, I'm going to drive by their house and drop off a packet on their front porch. It's so our grant program, which Michael just put up, which is great, our teacher grant program, we've given grants to teachers who have said, if I have this tool or this resource, I can really transform my classroom and bring the future of school for my students. And most of them are very low cost. We're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars. So these teachers embody the entrepreneurial spirit that they've had. I don't expect that every teacher has that, but what I would say is what you're doing today to make it through the rest of the year is crisis schooling. You're in a state of crisis schooling. Maybe you've recently shifted to remote teaching, but next year is the year of intentionality. Next year is the year that really we'll be able to see where the schools and districts going to be able to leverage training, professional development, to be able to bring in technology for what meets the needs of that school or community, because every school is different.
Right. Brian, let me bring you back into this now. I know you were interested in hearing from Amy too. What are you thinking when you hear about the notion of sort of that teacher training piece? And is there anything you're hearing now that you want to reflect on?
Yeah, I agree with a lot what Amy says about sort of the journey of a teacher over the last 8 weeks, right? In our case, we realized that it's likely that we may not be able to get a bunch of people together and do professional development here before school starts, right? That's the likely scenario.
Right.
So we do believe that there is an opportunity and a way to do both synchronous and asynchronous professional development virtually. And so we're in the process of developing that right now. And so I'm excited about that, quite frankly, because maybe we've been resistant just because we always felt like, well, if you can't sit in front of each other and ask questions and engage face to face, then the quality of the development isn't going to be as good. But what we're seeing based on early stages of our development right now is that it's probably going to be better. It's probably going to be a better learning or the development experience for our teachers, because they will be able to do it, one, when it makes sense for them to do it, two, to engage in smaller groups, three, to self-pace, and then come back again if they want a refresher, right? And they have these tools, they'll have these tools sort of at their fingertips. So I think it's exciting, and we're running as fast as we can towards it, mostly because we have to, because we got to get ready for next school year.
I have this visual in my head as you guys are talking also about training. Everyone's probably, if on their Facebook or Instagram, seeing these tremendous concerts and songs, the band from Notre Dame and, some religious choir and different things that people are putting together in sort of Zoom boxes as they come together and synchronizing it. And I'm married to a music teacher, so he's always like, that doesn't actually happen all at once. The violinists do their piece, and then you have the trombone, and then if it's music, you have the different parts, and they come together. And I'm raising that because they're kind of doing the synchronous and asynchronous training and practice that you're talking about. And they're keeping their craft and they're demonstrating it. And I'm wondering if it almost looks a little like that, school by school.
Well, I have no musical ability whatsoever, so I don't know if I can draw that analogy directly. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it does. Now, here's something that we have to think through, I think, is our teachers themselves are at various points in the spectrum on how sort of adept they are with some of the platforms that we will be using, right? And to your point earlier, most of them are so willing to sort of dive in and learn, but there are those teachers that sort of are like, I don't know. I'm not sure if this is sort of how I want to do school moving forward. So we have to think through that a little bit.
And what is the what do you think, Amy, is the future of in that sense, the future of sort of the new recruits for teaching? I mean, you can imagine students right now going to school to become teachers, or who are just out in the job market, or maybe they've been, thinking about teaching. Does this look dramatically, does school look dramatically different to them post-COVID?
I kind of see two different categories. I think there's the new recruits that are, graduating from college, and this is their passion pursuit. And so I think for them, it doesn't look dramatically different because these are the digital natives. These are the kids who have maybe they don't see it from the historical perspective we do, but they've lived that education is the only vertical in our society that hasn't been catalyzed by technology up to this point. Now, to future of school doesn't mean all kids are doing it online. That's certainly not what it means. It means figuring out where technology has a place in your school and how that can better differentiate instruction and allow for personalized learning. I think there's that category. So I don't think it looks wildly different from what they expect. I think it's exciting for them because they're going to be able to use their own tech skills and capabilities in the way that is intuitive to them as a generation. And then I think there's another category. I think that other category are people who are going down just a personal reflection right now in their careers saying, I want to do something that's meaningful, right? We've seen an increase in people who have shifted careers to go back into education. And I think that we're going to see an increase in those individuals saying, oh, online education, I've worked in software, or I've worked in this one field and I'm a specialist. I'm a mathematician. I'm a healthcare specialist, and I want to go back and be part of this new way of teaching and learning and have the flexibility to be able to do it in this blended environment, because it can be daunting for that category to step into a classroom when some people haven't really spoken public or worked in that environment, but they're so passionate about their content that they wanted to bring it to life. So that's what I would say there. And I think it will also give our current teaching population a chance to reevaluate which environment is better for them. And maybe it's blended. Maybe it's a mix of both, which is what schools are preparing.
And how do we help the parents out there, not just those who are less advantaged and are juggling a million things, but how do you help the parents out there that most of us went to a brick and mortar school? And so this is like just inconceivable that there is something like, how do I engage? And so what are we doing for them? And what are some new ways we can start thinking of the teacher helping be the coach to a parent, if you will? I mean, look, parental involvement, teachers have been complaining about it for years. I can't get to my parent. I can't do this. And, some of that is accurate. And some of that is, I just think some schools don't do it well. That's one of the reasons that charters have become so popular, for example, and other educational options, is because they figured out how to set expectations, how to encourage, how to basically change the framework of parents. How do we do that now, regardless of what kind of school it is?
Yeah, I agree with you. And one thing to preface that, because you reminded me of it, is our scholarship winners, these are kids who they didn't graduate from one particular school, right? They graduated from all types of schools, brick and mortar, online, blended, specifically chartered brick and mortar. And one of the amazing things is, while they weren't part of a pandemic or crisis, they and their families chose a new learning environment because it was better suited for their kids' needs. And so people have been making choices around that The difference where we are now is the majority of families, all families will say, who didn't choose different options, the choice was made for them. So a couple of things that we've been talking about as an organization is some of the most simple reminders and pieces have been really helpful for families, like reminding yourself that this is temporary. I heard last night that yesterday was day 49 of being in quarantine. It feels like, to your point, Jeannie, it feels like day 149. So reminding yourself that it's temporary and that all schools aren't going away. What education looks like will be different, but parents should feel empowered that I may not understand this wholly, but it's not my job to be the teacher unless I'm selected to homeschool my kids.
Right.
I'm the learning coach, and to kind of taking that label away reduces some of the pressure we feel. And I've certainly felt that, and I am a certified teacher. So if that makes anyone feel better, that's part of it. Communication is key, communicating with teachers, not just in a way of what is due for him or her or my kids. We've had parents take pictures of their kids in their remote learning environment and send it in email, and that has moved teachers to tears. So being creative in ways of communicating back, not just about the schoolwork. And I think also knowing that kids are going to be okay, right? And focusing on things that they like to do. There's a lot of learning that can happen in addition to what they're doing for school at home. They can help with experiential learning. They can help build things this spring. They can help in the kitchen with recipes. That learning happens every day in a lot of different ways. And so they may end up learning more. Someone brought it up earlier. They may end up learning more than they would have in a traditional environment. And as a parent, you have this amazing gift to watch your child learn and to learn how they learn best, even when it's frustrating. I saw a meme that said, you can either teach your child math or you can have a nice day, but you can't have both. And I thought that was really funny because parents feel that way. You're taking on this whole new role, but you have the support of your school, hopefully, and you have, putting your kids in the position of power. And then whenever you can, give them choice. It can be, what do you want to do? Do you want to start with science or would you like to start with art? Try to give them choice, because kids right now, out of anyone in our country and world, they have the least amount of power. So I think that's important. Even, would you like lemonade or do you want root beer? Even taking it out of the context of academics, keeping them in some sort of a position.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm having this picture of sitting. I know it's hard to believe coming out of my mouth that I was the parent who was like, are you doing your homework? Why are you moving? Why are you talking to somebody? What's going on? Like, how many people out there are thinking that's the role that suddenly a parent's having to play all the time? It's hard enough when that's just homework. But now you're like, aren't you supposed to be online? And so understanding, I think, Brian, you were saying earlier, you've got these schedules. You've laid out, this is 9 to 11. This is when you can call your teacher. These are online times. You have workbook. Understanding that and being able to say, sounds like you should be on your workbook right now. And then maybe nothing happened. You reach out to the teacher because the teacher is available. And it sounds like many of them are available kind of 24/7.
So, Jeannie, I'm going to interrupt. We've got a question for you, for both of our panelists. As an elementary school principal, I'm concerned with the integrity of testing children when they are at home. How do we ensure students' parents are operating in integrity to complete tests so that we have accurate data to assist in making certain decisions for the future of those students? Kim Scott. Thank you, Kim. Who wants to take that one first? Brian, Amy?
I can take a shot at it. We were talking about this just last week because we want to get one of the things we want to do early on is we want to get a clear assessment of where each of our students are, because we know that despite our best efforts, there's going to be some learning loss, and we want to understand exactly where we are. So we talk about, well, can we send these online assessments home via our platforms and have kids take them, and will that give us good data? And our response sort of is, well, if we do it correctly and frame it up correctly, then it will be better than nothing. So what we think is helpful is to utilize assessments just for assessments, not for grading purposes in a remote environment, right? If you're going to use an assessment sort of for grading purposes or promotion, right, you should be doing that in a more controlled environment, so to speak. That's sort of our perspective at this point.
I should point out, and I'm not sure, Amy, do you want to go take a stab at that?
Yeah, just one thing from putting my parent hat on with my son. He goes to the local charter school, and they have come up with some really creative ways of assessing student knowledge and student learning. And it's different from what he did in the brick and mortar classroom. And it's not like they brought in a company to create customized assessments in this remote learning environment, but they've done some really creative things that are more open-ended, that are more, they're definitely quantitative, but they're qualitative. It's to demonstrate to me through this project-based learning environment that you've learned what you should have learned through the readings. They've integrated, they'll do, post videos and then have simple checkbacks and then use an online tool to make sure that the students have mastered the vocabulary. And then this is the project you're going to complete. And they have the chance to do it over a few days with a simple rubric. And so for him at least, he's really enjoyed that. It has opened up his mind for being able to show and demonstrate how he has mastered the content. Now, as a parent, then there's me like, no, you have 20 more minutes to spend in there. And he's like, and so Jeannie, I feel you when you're like, sit in your chair. And I'm saying, you have 20 minutes. And he's like, but I did it in 10. So I've had to reshape my framing of it because I need to honor and respect the fact that it may not take him as long as they think it will. But if he can produce a high quality demonstration that he's learned it and mastered it, then that's what the redesign is all about. So I've been giving his charter school a lot of kudos and shout outs. And then also, Jeannie, I will put in the chat, I did run across an Edutopia article maybe a week ago that specifically talks about creating assessments for the remote learning environment while maintaining integrity. So I'll put that in there for the.
Yeah, and listen, there's no question. I mean, our first event of this season was with several ed tech providers, and we're going to do that again soon. There are just a tremendous number of programs, tools, services that can be deployed in the service of that. By the way, speaking of redesign, so Michael, the poll, people are still taking it, but it looks like 56% believe we should send kids back to brick and mortar schools and have digital learning as an alternative. 37% say we should scrap the whole thing and start over. And 7% said we should send kids back to school and continue to educate much like we have up until now. So interesting, right? And I think I don't have a horse in this race other than I think people should have that option, right? But we'll share. Are you surprised with those results, Brian?
I don't know that I'm surprised. I don't think so. I think I'm probably have this tension between the using technology going forward, much in the way that Amy speaks about it, as a way to supplement sort of what's happening in the classroom, especially in your younger grades, quite frankly, maybe more heavily digital in your older grades. But I also see an opportunity to sort of reinvent and think bigger. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just the practicality of the moment right now of, hey, we don't have that much time to sort of move into the next school season.
Right.
And so to sort of bite off something big and hairy at this point is probably a little more daunting.
Michael, other questions we have for them?
Right now, the crowds are silent. You have answered everything that they have thrown at you, Amy and Brian.
So I have
go ahead.
Do you have one? Because I have another one.
No, please, go ahead.
So there is, as we've talked about before, there's a bunch of money coming in from Washington to states. $13 billion initially being distributed across every state. Most of that is dedicated to LEAs. to apply, to do innovative things, to reach people. School districts and charter networks and others have been encouraged to use it to solve access problems, to do new technologies, to do training. And we're saying we should also be using it to expand learning to other people who don't have access to the kinds of programs you guys represent. What's your kind of big crystal ball? What would you say to the governor in any particular state, the way they should spend the 10% of discretionary funds that they have to decide how to go forward? So again, most of it is for LEAs to apply to determine what to do with. And there's this 10% that they can sit on, they can buy carpet, they could buy food, they could innovate. Any thoughts, Brian?
Sure. Yeah. This is another thing that we're trying to just make sense out of. I believe, I'm hopeful. What I would say to the governors is that it sure would be nice, and maybe this is idealistic, but it sure would be nice to have the flexibility to utilize those funds to supplement some of the practices that we have in place or would like to have in place, and not have those funds be utilized to supplement the standard per pupil funding allotments, right? And so I have this fear that because state budgets will take such a haircut, that a lot of governors will look to this money and say, well, I can lower my pupil per spending formulas and change those, and LEAs, schools, charter schools can then sort of utilize this money as to fill in the gap.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hopeful that that doesn't happen.
Amy, what do you think? I think that's great.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that, because when you break it down, it would be such a small amount of money, right? And so my thing is, how can you take that money and get the biggest bang for your buck? And I think using that money to bring people together virtually is fine. Listening to your superintendents, listening to your principals, and anyone else, the nonprofits in your state. So creating a collective where people can share what are some of the high level things that worked in this crisis schooling remote learning environment, and what are some things that really didn't work or that you felt like was not a good use of your money, whatever it was. Coming up with a list of those, and I hesitate to say, the phrase best practices, but coming up with a list of recommendations, and then distilling down what 2 areas are we going to invest this money? Because that first part doesn't take a lot of money. That takes time. That takes time and prioritization. But the second piece, and I think it'd be, for me, if I had to forecast, it would be professional development and teacher training, especially in light of budget cuts that, the proposed budget cuts that are going to come. How can we come together for PD and training that will focus on blended learning? And then the second piece would be equipping schools with what they need with that money, whether it's, it's hard to think that money is going to be able to provide all the tech that people need, but how can it be used in a really smart way based upon what that state-based collective or consortium feels like is in the best interest of schools based upon.
It's an important conversation to have, and it's important to put the ideas out there, because there are groups, there's a coalition of different education organizations, the typical, sort of folks at the national level, who came together basically and said, we're going to need money to take care of kids and support, sort of voluntary summer school, and to make sure, teachers are safe and all those things are good. But that was their only recommendation for money. There's an enormous number of people who have an enormous amount of power, and we see them all the time when we're able to go out of our homes into the streets of Washington and state capitals. And they're basically saying, oh, this is not going to last. And this is the NJEA said yesterday, remote education is no substitute for brick and mortar learning. Done, finished, end of story, not an option. And so they're going to drive these conversations. And so one of the reasons we do this is because we want people to think not only big, we want them to see that others are thinking big and struggling with questions, right, Brian and Amy, and having experiences doing things differently. But we also have to develop a true army of people who are going to address these issues nationally and state by state, because we're not, even outside of COVID, we're not killing it, folks, right? I mean, the NAEP results just a few weeks ago that showed 15% of students who are doing history proficiently, civics, geography, it's like 15 to 25%. And even for those affluent kids we're talking about who we think all their parents are so great. By the way, I've been in that community for a really long time. I worked my butt off to get in it. I wasn't born into it, but they're really not that smart. Or not as good as you all think with kids, I should say. But even in those communities, I'll tell you what, there are some changes that people really want to make. And so we have got to, and kids are not learning. So we have got to make some changes in that regard as well. I also just want to share, we have someone on from Kenya that's struggling with how to do this, and they're going to want to get in touch. And then there's an awful lot of people out there, and it's so encouraging in districts that are doing it well. And so I think there's a big tent and there's a big opportunity. Closing thoughts, conversation, and before we let people go grab their coffee and their lunches. Amy?
Sure. Yeah, I would say that for the different meetings and conversations I've had, the one word that keeps coming up is grace. It's having grace. Teachers having grace for parents, parents having grace for teachers, all of us in the education ecosystem having grace for each other, knowing that it's a difficult situation, but there's a lot of silver linings. And I'm just, I would encourage people to remember that in the difficult moments and know that we're all in this together, and that the future of school is bright, even though we can't see it with our eyes right now. It truly.
Thanks, Amy. Brian?
I would just say thank you, even though there might not be many parents that are listening right now. I just am in awe still of sort of the way that people are embracing and doing the best that they can to educate their kids and making it a priority. So I just have a great deal of respect and thanks for them and for our staff, especially, that have really worked so hard around the clock and rallied so hard to implement remote learning, to get meals to families and to see them engage in the communities. It's been awesome. And Jeannie and Michael, you both leaning in at this time is more important than ever. So I just see lots of great things happening in our communities and folks coming together.
Well, thank you both for being with us today. Lots and lots to do. I encourage you all again out there, as we've talked before, let us know who else you want to hear from. We'll have more folks that are doing online and blended in the future. We're going to be looking at New Orleans and how New Orleans turned all their schools around also almost overnight. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks. And we look forward to continue to working with you. And thanks for your patience. I know we're not hitting everybody's questions all the time and not solving everyone's problems, but please do reach out to us. And any of you that didn't get something answered, we will be reaching out to you. So thank you again. Happy Tuesday. Happy Teacher Appreciation Day. Cinco de Mayo. And hope everyone stays safe and healthy. See you all soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody.
All right. Bye.